do that, and we have some games. But we like to know all the different platforms out there, anything from social platforms to AR, VR. It's a really exciting time, so I'm glad to be here.
I'm Bob Gardner. I'm the lead games evangelist at Intel. I'm mostly coming from the hardware background. Intel is, I mean, they're a behemoth, right? Like the air in the room. There is no PCs without us, really, given market share, and you're either building on us or for us or with us, right? Like that's just the state of affairs. We're moving from being a CPU-centric company to being data-centric and trying to be more innovative around platforms, which brings around hardware platforms, which brings its own set of challenges, which hopefully I can get people's opinions on as we go on.
Cool. I'm Becky Ann Hughes. I'm VP GM at Glue Mobile. We do games like Kim Kardashian, Deer Hunter, Gordon Ramsay Dash, Cooking Dash, those types of things. I run the studio that does the Dash franchise. We're currently right now running 2 major live games and starting to prototype for brand new things coming out in the next few years, of which we're very seriously considering various types of platforms.
Okay, and when we talked about this meeting of minds the other day in our call, we sort of were like, well, platform, that's a huge topic, right? I mean, everything's a platform, and if you listen to some of those talks earlier today, reality is a platform, which it kind of is in some ways. So we might jump around talking about various types of platform plays, whether we're talking about mobile platforms or authoring platforms or back-end services, VR, AR. But then there's the whole world of analytics platforms, advertising platforms that aggregate platforms, and we know that the VC community loves them. So with that in mind, it's a pretty wide arena. I know, Michael, you recently had some experience building a platform from scratch and also working with Facebook Instant Games. Could you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, so we recently had 2 slightly different platform experiences, and the first is that we partnered with a large Japanese company called Rakuten, and Rakuten kind of had an interesting background in digital entertainment in the sense that they really wanted to release a portfolio of games that were tied together through a unified currency, because Rakuten is all about these loyalty points. So it's kind of like credit card loyalty points, but on steroids. So, I mean, it's the sort of different ways you earn their points and kind of how much people are addicted to that framework is pretty intense in Japan. And so they have pretty much anyone who has a credit card in Japan is a part of the Rakuten ecosystem. But they really failed to go and merge that user base with the distribution of the App Store. And the reason, probably everyone here knows it, is because Apple says you can't have this other currency that's unified between games. And that was really the sort of driving kind of lever that Rakuten had to do cross-promotion and actually grow that platform. And so for a long time, they just couldn't do it. And so they actually tried a lot of things. They tried to launch their own Android phone, create their own Android App Store. But fundamentally, the problem is, the mobile platform is actually both Android and iOS together. You can't really do half of it. And so when we met them and kind of demonstrated that you could have really compelling user experiences right inside of a web view or a web browser, and that hadn't been true before that for many years. A lot of people tried, and it was just starting to become true. They were very excited because it allowed the 2 of us together, Blackstorm and Rakuten, through a joint venture called Rakuten Games, to launch sort of a, kind of a competitor to the App Store in a lot of ways, where it's a web portal that's tied into the rest of their ecosystem. And so we actually built that, from scratch. It's sort of like we were building our own App Store. And it was really interesting. I mean, we learned a lot about the things you have to think through, everything from when you have third-party developers who are trying to game your system, to fraud and payments processing, to how you do fair discovery, how you try to make sure indies have a chance. And it turned out to be really difficult, and I think we did a good job. It launched last month. There was a lot of press around it. The hardest thing that we found, though, was figuring out the right sort of focus in your initial content portfolio. And that would be do you just go out there and blast everyone and try to get thousands of games that people sort of ported over, or do you work very closely with a few developers? And we kind of tried both at first, and then we found out that the best way was to find the most excited developers, not just pay the big ticket IP to kind of just say, hey, do a half-ass port, but go find, almost like a smaller, like sometimes an indie, sometimes a medium studio, and say, hey, look, we want to be your number one priority, and we'll make you a priority as well, and work very closely together to build something that fits the new platform. And probably all of our best games kind of came out of that story. And then the flip side was Facebook, where we were one of the content creators, and they actually treated exactly like that. And they said, look, if you are focused on this project and you're willing to take our platform very seriously, we'll work closely, we'll listen to what you have to say, and we'll enable you to be successful. And so far, we actually just put out a new update today, and it's growing really fast. It was a worldwide launch to the platform of 1.2 billion users. And so now we're watching the content sort of saturate that over the last couple hours. I don't really know right now where it's going, but it's going pretty quickly. So,
what was your first? I want to get to both of you very soon. What was the game that you launched on the Facebook Instant Games platform?
So we launched a game called Everwing, which is
It's you?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Have you played?
Oh yes. A lot.
That's great to hear. Thank you. We put a lot of effort into it. There's sort of two aspects of it. The first is that it's a really addictive arcade experience. I mean, it kind of harkens back to like the original, 80s, almost like Space Invaders. Sort of the bullet dodgers. And then we sort of layered on top of it this kind of progression. We made it fantasy themed instead of just sci-fi. We thought it'd be a broader audience, and then we layered on top this progression, sort of that a lot of fantasy movies have, where you're not just playing it once for fun, like you put a chord and you play and you leave. It's like you're playing it over many months, and you're sort of unlocking an interesting world. You're learning more about the fairies we call guardians of this sort of world, the monsters attacking, the dragons who are allies. And then we looked at Pokemon Go, like not even Pokemon Go, but like the original Pokemon on Game Boy in the 90s, and the whole collection mechanic, and we said we're going to do the exact same thing, have hundreds of different dragons. You got to find different ways to collect them, and then we kind of added in ways to fuse them and kind of evolve them over time. And then we took it to the next step last month with what are called boss raids, and we said we really like the way in which guilds inside MMOs all get together and like hundreds of people collaborate towards a really, really tough goal. And so we built a framework where inside of a chat channel, a chat group, hundreds of people can collaborate on trying to tackle this really hard weekly goal. And if they manage to together coordinate and defeat the boss, then they get some kind of treasure. And so we've watched our engagement and growth just sort of take off as a lot of our users discover kind of how to work together the best. And so we're really excited about the update today because we put out a set of features where we said, I wonder what's going to happen. And we watched a bunch of really cool things happen. People organize on Reddit, people create groups, set group alarm clocks to time everything the best.
That's amazing.
And then we went and said, let's now build a set of features to help them all out. And that's sort of what today's launch is about.
That's amazing. And then Bob, with Intel, I noticed that you are focused, or tell me if your LinkedIn is correct, that you're focused especially on the VR multi-core initiative. Is that correct?
Yes, so it's complicated.
Mm-hmm.
If any of you have been paying attention to the silicon industry the last couple of years, Intel reorganized itself quite dramatically about 18 months ago, which means I'm now a man who wears many hats, shall we say. I deal a lot with our developer enabling for multi-core CPUs and for anything related to VR. So if you go downstairs, you can try out the Unspoken, and we've got a video where you can see the side-by-side between Unspoken running on an i5 and Unspoken running on an i7. So I work with the guys from Unspoken. Honestly, the biggest difficulty I have in my day-to-day is kind of been touched upon by a bunch of different people over the last sort of 24 hours, which is x86, like just the instruction set, is literally the air in the room for most of the games industry. Like I said, you're either building for it or you're building on it. which puts us in a really awkward position, right? When you're a company as big as Intel, if you need to innovate, otherwise eventually someone's just going to come along and shoot you. But you need to innovate in a way that's actually going to make a noticeable effect on the bottom line, right? And when you're a $60 billion company, that's a challenge. And when we try, we run into platform challenges. Most of these challenges amount to persuading developers to pick new platforms. Right? You are probably intimately aware of the cost of how much it is, the cost of developing a video game, right? So if I come along as a hardware vendor and I say, I'm trying to ship X, which is a completely new thing that hasn't been done before.
Hell no. That's what I would say.
So, exactly. And from a business perspective, that is absolutely the sensible thing for you to say, right? But it puts us in a really awkward, a slightly interesting position. We're sat in Gamesbeat, and the subject of the Gamesbeat Summit is how do you use sci-fi to inspire the future, right? And I feel like if you want to use sci-fi to inspire the future, someone has to place bets on those platforms that haven't hit critical mass yet. We have to make the bet on building them. Other people have to make the bets on supporting them. But how do you make that decision? When is the right time to jump on? When is the right time to ignore it? How does the hardware vendor persuade the software vendor when you don't have the install base, short of just opening their checkbook, right? Like, being a hardware supplier, being a silicon vendor, really gives you, I think, a unique view on how the sausage is made of the business underneath game development. And sometimes I do fear that the bright shining future that we all want, we're not going to get to because we're also focused on, and this includes Intel in this, by the way, we do it too, because we're so busy making sure that the shareholders see value today.
Yeah.
How do you balance that?
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer to that question is.
That one clear. Especially in the investment community, they're extremely fixated on platform plays, right? And I get it. It's risky to invest in content. I get it. We're not the film industry. And at some point, though, you have to ask yourself if all these investments in the platforms is just as risky as investing in an indie film. But Becky Ann, I know that when we were speaking the other day, it was really fascinating to hear from you because you are responsible for managing some global franchises, most notably the Dash franchise. And the decision-making that goes into play for choosing one platform or another, or choosing ties into audience and managing the entire franchise worldwide. Can you talk about that a little bit, or do any recent examples come to mind?
Yeah. I'd also like to hear what other folks think about this as well. For me, I've now been at Play First, Glue Play. We got acquired about 3 years ago, for 7 years. And I've seen the Dash franchise go from PC, try-buy and premium, to Facebook and fail, to mobile, to freemium in about a 7-year time frame. It's wild. I've worked with 350 people since the beginning of my tenure, and when we were acquired, we were down to 22. Small, scrappy little group, and we've grown the franchise by many, many, many times what it was doing just 2 years ago. Some of that has to do with decision on platform, for sure. Where are you placing your bets? But a lot of it actually has to do with your audience. Where they're at, what they're willing to do. And the second thing is also your team. What can your team do, and how can you pick the platforms that empower them? There's a lot of times where we've picked platforms that are just like, hey, we need an analytics platform because we don't really know how to do analytics. It's the worst thing you can do, because if you don't have an internal expertise on analytics, you can instrument it, but you'll never use it well enough. So I'm interested to kind of hear what you guys are thinking about platform. What are challenges you might be hitting up against, things you might be, like, challenges you're facing when you're deciding about platforms?
I'll say we just published 2 big games in the last 60 days, one with the Godfather franchise, which I told you, and one with NBA. And I've been through the same. I mean, we went from we had one of the first very popular games on iOS when the first iPhone came out. So we've gone through that free model to the paid model to the paydium to the freedium, free to play, all that. But it's definitely like a living and breathing ecosystem. And the answer is that what we're doing today, is always changing. The thing that I've learned the most from it is to try not to be chasing the next thing, but try to, get to that, get ahead of that curve as much as you can. But it's really hard, and all these new platforms are making it difficult. And it's interesting that you're doing that Instaplay stuff, but I guess there's no monetization value yet, right?
Right.
And then is it? I know that's all in the talks or whatever, but it definitely puts you in a good position once it happens.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about Facebook is they're much more of a Silicon Valley company than kind of a games company, and sure, you could be both. I think we are, but in Silicon Valley, what I've come to find is that there's such an effort or such a focus on growth. There's this idea if you can drive growth, then you can probably figure something out. And so that doesn't work with a normal business because you're trying to money, right? Yes. But in Silicon Valley it works because there's a bunch of VCs who also believe that. Mm-hmm. And so it means that sometimes it takes a little bit longer to kind of resolve the platform that you'd like. And so I think there's definitely a lot of people who looked at instant games and just said, wait a second, can you give us even a heads up on when there'll be monetization? Yeah. And when that answer wasn't, quickly apparent, then a lot of them just said no way. And I completely understand that. On the other hand, the way we look at it is the time to adopt a platform is if the content is the last piece missing to kind of unlock 10x or 100x growth. If that's the case, it becomes much more of a no-brainer because it's like, well, there are billions of people on Facebook who use it every single month, and they're building the APIs, but they really don't have the content. So if we can jump in there and we can sort of unlock that platform, then it's exciting and interesting. And so we decided to make a bet, and yeah, it's a bet. Everwing is right now just sort of a charity project for humanity, I guess.
Yeah, we just have been integrating like iMessage to like platform specific stuff. iMessage, I'm sure you guys have started doing it too. Yeah. Different things the platforms are doing. But I definitely agree with what you're saying about like integrating an analytics platform, not have an expert and you do the work but you never use it.
Never use it. Yeah, the thing about platform. I guess the big question is like the definition of a platform. Because I actually think Dash games are a platform in a sense because we have a network of users that has been with us for like 16 years, right? So from my perspective, my platform, at least for my game, is the Dash franchise. And all of the users that are with that, and then how I can grow that user base and actually kind of, we've used the platform for Gordon Ramsay and a whole bunch of their chefs that are now using our audience to reach new people that they've never actually
almost like a platform soapbox.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll mention just really quickly I'm working on either building a few platforms from scratch now or working on existing platforms, just to give you a sense. Because I think the word platform, I think we need more nuance around that word, to your point, in some ways. So I'm working on one platform now where I'm just doing the gamification, a fun word people love here, that's going to be focusing on conduct behavioral disordered children, teens, and that's an NIH-funded project. I just want to give a sense of the range. Working on a fitness platform, building it from scratch. I just rolled out a citizen science platform with Scripps Research Institute, and then there's another one that we're working on, which is kind of confidential now, but again related to NIH projects. And what struck me especially building something from scratch, and this is the second or third time I've tried to build a platform from scratch, I did it during the virtual world era, was how many resources it takes if you really want to get a developer strategy and onboarding. In the case of the citizen science platform, we were working with scientists from all over the world, trying to get them to integrate with our leaderboards and our high scores and our universal profiles and logins. And the amount of resources and education it took, I was a little bit overwhelming because we're such a small company. But even given the fact that I had a background in it, it gave me a renewed appreciation for the platform creators regarding how much work it is documentation, ticketing system, education, onboarding, and then modifying the platform to suit various needs that emerge that you just couldn't have anticipated around quest structure. So it's, but you know, we decided in every case to build it rather than license something off the shelf because of all the risks involved in that. So I don't know if you guys have anything you want to say to that, or
it's a hard problem, right? So a couple of years ago, Intel tried to make a break into mobile, but obviously every mobile game in the universe is built with an ARM package. And when we started, nothing had x86 packages, because why would you, right? It's a waste of build time and it's a waste of money. It took 3 years and $1 billion to get to the point where you could pick up an x86 device and things would work on it. It took 3 years, $1 billion, and 1,000 people to make that happen. It's a seriously hard problem. And, I mean, I don't fault anyone for making the decision. Like, if I'm in... This is a conversation I have relatively frequently, right? Like, my job is literally to go into a games developer and persuade them to perform an unnatural act, right? That is my job. It is to walk into your guys' companies and go, Intel is going to do X. We are going to ship X many millions of units with that thing in it over the next year. Please place a bet on us. And fundamentally, at the end of the day, put some proportion of your bottom line at risk based on a promise that we're making. That's a really hard pill to swallow. Like, that's really difficult. And having done it in hardware, I don't think it's any easier if you're a software supplier, right? Take a look at, like you said, you're talking about Facebook Live games. You're talking about competing with the Google Play Store. The Google Play Store, which has 1 billion credit cards attached to it, right? Which comes pre-installed on everyone's device, which is the first place someone goes when they want a thing on their Android phone. Like, how do you persuade that user, no, you should go and look at this other thing and get this game from there? Or, like I said at day one, I don't have the answers, because right now the answer that we use is you throw people money and time at it. But that is not a solution that everyone has available to them, and it's just really hard.
What's interesting in all of that is it being that hard. In your case, you still know, like the game developers know, that at the end of the day, the user experience is a tried and true user experience, and the biggest risk is will you deliver on kind of your baseline growth with the promises you've made. I think it's even more challenging with Facebook, because on the one hand, they still have a dial, how much they're going to drive growth, and they need to deliver on that. But secondly, it's an untested user experience. So we're inventing something new.
Yeah.
It's never existed before. It's kind of like it's on a phone at least, but you don't discover it in an app store. You don't have push notifications. You don't have a home screen icon.
Mm-hmm.
All your games have to be sort of multiplayer and social from the beginning, even though there aren't a lot of good examples of that you can sort of take inspiration from on the App Store. And so now you have this kind of product risk, and you have the growth risk, and of course the monetization risk. And so this is why a lot of people think we're crazy for jumping in and doing it. And the way we looked at it is just, if there's a long enough leg, this huge lever of potential growth that we see, which is the user base of Facebook, then we'll give it a try. And that's how we made our decision. But I think actually with the minority, I think most people just have not invested in this platform, and it's been very, I don't want to speak for Facebook, but I think it's been very frustrating for them.
Yeah, I think there's two issues here. Like, for me, it's where the audience is, right? So in order for me to make the revenues that I need to support my studio, I definitely need to have a user base that is on the platform, that is already has their credit cards there, and that I can easily develop a great experience. So for me, audience matters. And I usually don't place bets on platforms that don't have audience. We made the mistake of betting on, well, not betting, but trying Windows Phone at some point. Everyone's too excited about it. Nah, that was stupid, right? Like it didn't actually pan out. because the audience wasn't there, and they probably weren't the audience that are Dash players either, right? And there's the other side that we were talking about, which is build or buy. I actually don't think it's either or ever. I think it's usually a combination of things that happens. I think if you go and build it all, you better support it, and that better be your core business, because otherwise you will never do it as well as somebody else. If you decide to go all in on platform, usually you won't be able to pull the learnings in from those platforms, and you won't have the internal expertise. So if anything happens, you're in trouble. So I think the important part about determining, placing bets and determining build or buy is to have open discussions with your team. Understand what your objectives are. Why are you doing things? What are you trying to do? What are your objectives? And then look at what's the range of what am I going to build and what am I going to buy, and you're going to put those things together. That's typically how we approach our decision-making process.
I think there's a lot of, with the build versus buy, is really focusing on your core expertise. And the real problem with developers, in my opinion, and I've been in the games development business since the early 90s, is that all developers think that they can do it as good as anybody. But back to your point, you really need to think about what are you really good at and what is more of a commodity that somebody else might have a solution that would help with, like you say, the analytics or the payments or something else, because you probably don't understand how complicated it really is to do that.
Yeah.
I think anytime you put a critical mass of engineers in a room together, there is, and I am a programmer. I've done games programming. I've worked in games companies. I've seen this happen. I've done it myself. Once you get past a critical mass, there is definitely not invented here syndrome just percolates up.
Put non-engineers in the room, that'll get fixed. That'll fix it. I mean, that's actually something that's interesting about what we've gone through is there was times where engineering focused, times where you would make the decision with engineers, and there are times you're just really product focused and you'd make the decision with your product managers. Neither of those is right. Mm-hmm. You got to get everyone in the room. You have to make a very clear, multi-sided decision. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you're usually going to get the thing that the one group wants. Yeah.
I want to say something maybe a little bit controversial about the Facebook instant games platform. And, if they're struggling in some ways, one might say that they only have themselves to blame, because as somebody who's been in the game industry for a while, first of all, I would take the bet. If they came to me, they threw money at me. I had the opportunity to be one of the people first in. I don't think it's a bad decision at all. I think it was a smart decision. However, there's a trust issue where we've seen in the game industry how a lot of these non-gaming platform providers have a very tentative relationship to the games industry. I experienced it back in my days at Macromedia when 75% of everything that was being made and Flash were games, but the executives just didn't want to hear about it. And then we've seen the waves of Facebook games. Be something that was as a game developer, I would say to myself, well, how loyal are they going to be to me if I invest all of my time and resources on their platform? And I would say the same goes for the Oculus platform in some ways, because I've noticed a tension in the VR community between games and everything else that's VR. And we're always first in line to prove out concepts and work out the kinks in any system, and I think sometimes we pay the price for that. So that's just a bit of an editorial. I don't know what you all think about that.
I think that I think if you can draw a line between interacting with the games industry and cash in their pocket, you're probably safe. If you can't, or that line appears to be nebulous, be a bit more wary. So, for example, the team that I now working at Intel, I'm the developer relations team. The other half of our team is the partner marketing team. And what it does is we buy keys from game developers and then we give them away to people that buy CPUs. And we can directly tie the purchase of those keys from a game developer to X billions of dollars of Intel's bottom line. And we can say, if we didn't give the software away, this person would have bought this SKU instead of this SKU, and thus we would have lost X amount of revenue. And as long as we can prove that, Intel is never going to stop buying keys and never going to stop interacting with game developers. I think if that line is a little harder to spot, I can see why you'd be skeptical. Because at the end of the day, we're all in business, and businesses exist to make money, not provide charity. So
that's exactly right, and that's the thing people don't realize about Facebook is that they're a giant gaming company. If you look at the revenue, and they're disguised as something else, like some sort of advertising platform with a social network. But actually, if you go and look at who spends the most money in like the world on their products, it's maybe not Unilever, like maybe it's Machine Zone or Supercell, and they spend the majority of that, or a huge segment of that, on app install ads, which show up in the Facebook timeline. And the average in the world is like $3 or $4 per user. And so when it comes to Facebook, it's not actually quite as straightforward as does Facebook believe in gaming and support gaming, and will they be fickle, or will they be loyal? It's more like there's this ongoing internal balance about the shape of the game platform, right? And there's two shapes that are kind of playing out internally. One shape is, look, we don't want to extend our social network into the game. Let's just create like a more of a commodity product, which is an install, and just sell that. And then that way, when Facebook looks at it, they can say we can take a certain margin out of the game revenue. And actually, that tends to be a pretty big margin. Like if you look at Facebook's share of Machine Zone's revenue, it's significant. Whereas in the old days, they only took 30% or something like that, which is actually less. But then on the other hand, they've now commoditized all of Facebook to just be an app install. And so the moment someone comes with more engagement, like a Snapchat or someone else, then they quickly lose their market share. So they say, no, we should be more of an entrenched platform, not just like a platform for commoditized user acquisition. Let's be a platform to drive how the games work. Let's make the products, force them to shape themselves to our network so they can never leave. For us, the way we look at it is, Facebook is a huge gaming company. They're always going to be, or for a long time, going to be a huge gaming company. The comparables around the world are huge gaming companies like Tencent, who has QQ and WeChat, same exact thing. But the question is, will they go the path of their mobile platform today, which is really just an advertising platform, or will they go the path of their old web platform, which is something that fits better with our business model? And that's actually hard to control, and that's where the risk is, as far as we look at it.
Interesting. Yeah. I think for us, when we're looking at new things, the biggest thing to really look at is, what is your business, right? What's your business model? How are you actually sustaining what you're spending, and how much revenue you're actually getting in? And it's very easy when you have a stable revenue base to do that, and you can always peel off. Like we definitely a lot of times in games, what will happen is that you will start making money, and then all your resources will get sucked into making more money and more money in that particular game or that thing, and then you forget about what are other areas that I should be experimenting with, like the Facebook platform or like new things. So we have a very small group of about 5 folks that are all around. They do prototyping. And that's all we do. We'll prototype on new concepts, new things, new platforms, whatever. That way, if something like starts to show interest, like the Facebook platform, will be on there because we won't get stuck flat-footed. We will have already experimented with it, and we will have an opportunity. So it's basically about maintaining optionality more than it is about picking where to go, at least from my perspective, when you're running a brand like a Dash franchise.
We do the same thing. So Intel has a big division called the New Technology Group, and they do literally exactly the same thing, right? Like they go, it looks like AR might be a thing, right? Okay, well, what does it take to build AR glasses that are commercially viable, right? What does it take to build a VR headset that's commercially viable? What does it take to build an automotive vehicle, a self-driving car that's commercially viable? And we have this group which is composed of small teams, laser-focused on proving a concept and proving that we can turn that concept into a mass-market profitable thing. So you're right. That way you get the benefit of placing those bets by basically going, well, I know black is going to come up, so I'm going to stick all of my coins on black, but I've got a couple of the 50 cents chips. I'll just dot them over there.
So I was thinking of asking Becky Ann this question, but this could go for anyone here. Is there, we talked about building from scratch versus licensing something that's off the shelf. Is there something that, and we did talk about focus on your core expertise. Don't go out of your expertise trying to build a hugely scalable system if you don't really have those folks on staff. But is there something that, even if you had the expertise on board, you would not build from scratch? Are there examples of the types of platforms that you would say it's just best just to, I can think of some, for me it would be advertising platforms. We can implement the technology to do the advertising, but it's the whole infrastructure behind powering the advertising platform. So we would probably never build that from scratch. But then there's so many advertising platforms out there. How do you tell who isn't selling their inventory to each other and which one's reputable and gives you the best users? But that's just my answer. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that front.
As someone that builds hardware, that works for a hardware company and interacts with hardware all the time, let somebody else build the hardware.
Let somebody else build it, yeah.
I would if I could.
I actually, for me, it really depends. A lot of this depends on your objectives, on your team, and kind of what it is. So I wouldn't necessarily say I wouldn't build any of those platforms, because in 3 years, advertising platform might be something very different than it is now, right? Advertising platform is going to be AR. That's what is going to happen, and it's already starting to happen. So, for me, it is very dependent on time and objectives and team and all of that stuff. So it depends for me.
So maybe you have any thoughts or questions? I thought I saw some folks who wanted to comment or question on that.
Lots of thoughts, no question.
Hugh, you're...
I lived the wars.
You're representing, so
I'm like
please
the
tell us.
He-Mitch of gaming. Anyway, one question I do have for you specifically is, are you on Kick as well?
So we explored Kick first. And the interesting thing to answer actually both your question and the build versus buy question, as a small company, we had to go out and make a big pitch to investors and raise a Series A. And what it tends to be is here's this one fundamental belief we have about where the world's going, and then everything else is de-risk the rest. Get the best engineers, don't spend too much money. Don't have crazy office parties. It's basically de-risk everything but that one big bet. Mm-hmm. And for us, that big bet is we said, well, the distribution power of HTML5, especially when combined with communication, has the potential to be the largest and most viral game platform on earth. But the problem was, it hadn't happened yet. We thought it was going to happen earlier, then it started to happen with Kick. But in the meantime, as we started exploring why hasn't it happened, it actually becomes a lot of a technology problem. We had to build our own technology platform because there was no way to create the content that was good enough for the user experience. So we spent literally years building an HTML5 engine. And so we had to do all of the work of a Unity or a Cocos 2DX with no revenue opportunity whatsoever for years. And in some ways, we doubled down and doubled down again on the bet we made without doing sort of a pivot. And so then when Kick comes out and says, oh, hey, we believe in your vision too, and it's sort of the first one, we absolutely went and built on Kick. I think Kick was really innovative, and I really like Kick. I think one thing they struggle with is compared to the Facebook Messengers or the Snapchats or the WeChats of the world, they have a smaller stick when it comes to Apple, and it takes sort of a lot of kind of back and forth to figure out exactly how you carve a new platform out of this sort of existing platform Apple already has. And I think Kick really struggled with that. They shipped monetization right off the bat. They shipped interesting forms of distribution. Then they had to roll it back in big ways because Apple would come and say, no, that's not right. And so we actually did. We launched a couple of games, and it was interesting. We learned a lot, and the only reason we're probably as successful as we are on Facebook is because we went and and spend $1 million like learning about Kick, and had no outcome except the outcome is now sort of expressed, I think, in Everwing on Messenger.
That's a really good. What that made me think of was you constantly reevaluating your decisions, especially if you're in the forefront. Because if you just stick into that kind of one area, you'll never learn anything, and you actually might get caught in a platform that's not viable.
So you said something that interested me, which is you made an assumption, right? You made an assumption that technology was going to go down path X, whatever path X was. And a lot of people make these assumptions, right? The big one at the moment is VR. Everyone is assuming that in the next few years there's going to be a VR explosion, everyone's going to have these things, and they're going to be everywhere. Or you mentioned AR ads, right? Which first requirement means that everyone has to have access to AR in order for there to be a sufficient user base to get eyeballs on the ads, etc., etc. Elon Musk was about 3 or 4 months ago did a talk about going to Mars. I don't know if any of you watched it. About where he described what he referred to as the BFR, the big fucking rocket, that he plans on sending hundreds of people to Mars in. And his argument for doing that, even though there really right now isn't a profit motive for developing this thing, was the opposite. It was technology doesn't just roll forwards like a stone down a hill. It only moves because there's people behind it pushing it up the hill. I'm really curious to know whether the people in this room think that there's enough people pushing that stone in VR and AR, and whether you actually think that assumption is going to hold true or not.
I think that VR is a niche. VR is more like PC was years ago, and AR is mobile, in my mind, if I was to compare the two. I think there's enough momentum towards it. I think it's going to take longer than people think. But I think that VR is going to be harder because I mean, I just got a setup for Oculus. It's like, to buy the computer, everything, it's like thousands and thousands of dollars, right? That's not just really expensive. You're never going to have a broad audience for that. I actually think AR is closer than we think, and I think this is powerful enough to have a lot of AR experiences. It may not be glasses, and that's fine. But the people that are going to use VR are currently using a mobile device. And there are a lot of things that you can prototype and you can do. You can learn about AR before it actually hits, and you will be right in there with the mainstream when AR is ready.
I think AR is a lot more approachable from a consumer perspective as opposed to VR. Plus, no one's really addressed it, maybe I'm crazy, but I've been reading various articles and the like that would make you believe that Apple's next iPhone is going to have some AR capabilities built in. It's all hush-hush, no one's really talking about it, except everybody's talking about it. So, if that happens, obviously that will be a big platform enabler for everybody. And if Apple's doing it, well, then of course you'll be seeing Samsung and others doing it as well. I mean, life doesn't live in a vacuum. So, I do think VR will eventually get there, but I think, like I said, I think AR will, like I say, it's more approachable because you're not like blinded with this big headset on your head. But there'll definitely be a market for it. I just think it's probably 3 years out, whereas AR will probably overtake it much quicker. That's my opinion.
Hugh, did you have something to say?
Actually, to comment on the VR thing, tons of money, tons of bodies behind it. I don't think it's going to work. AR, I agree. But my other question is, does anybody consider Alexa a platform?
Yes, absolutely.
I do too. I'm fascinated by it. All the possibilities for development on Alexa. In fact, I know Amazon, and
I work for Amazon.
you might want to speak about your lumberyard too, if you are interested.
That's okay. We're short on time.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to say I'm excited, and I don't want to take your fire. I'm excited about it. I know Amazon's released some tools. I've been dying, even in my spare time, to just get in there and do some interactive narrative stuff. But
We're prototyping.
yeah, it's exciting. I actually wrote up a bunch of concepts for Amazon early on for Alexa.
I am very confused on this new one that just came out where it takes the pictures of the people and the fashion. I guess I'm not the target market for it, but.
Oh, the thing was in the paper yesterday.
The new,
This is a camera,
the
Alexa
camera,
with
Alexa
camera.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Echo, or I can't remember what.
Yeah,
it's called.
I